Hi there. Hi, and welcome to the 2020 LULAC Muscatine Political Forum debate. My name is Daniel Salazar, and I will be your moderator this evening. LULAC stands for League of United Latin American Citizens and is one of the oldest civil rights organizations in the country. The mission of LULAC is to advance the economic condition, educational attainment, political influence, housing, health, and civil rights of the Hispanic population of the United States. We would also like to thank the Muscatine Community College for allowing us to use their facilities and all the students here who are behind the scenes using this as a learning experience. Before we start, I would like to point out we are all physically distant, allowing us for the removal of masks, and LULAC is a nonpartisan organization. So tonight we are joined by Republican candidate for County Attorney James Barry. Barry is the interim attorney and believes it is a wonderful opportunity to give back and do something useful for the community, our state, and our country. His philosophy is that the office serves the community and is a part of one of the great groups dedicated to change in people's lives. We're also joined by Democratic candidate for County Attorney Bill Tharp. Tharp looks forward to ending the soap opera in Muscatine County by not entering unnecessary conflicts, being sued, and ending any mismanagement, corruption, or questionable actions. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So just to reiterate, you will both be asked the same question, have 2 minutes to respond, and then a minute or so to respond to the other person and have discussion. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. Let's begin. So this first question involves diversion programs. So the question is, will you commit to promoting the use of diversion and or treatment programs as alternatives to incarceration for drug offenders and defendants with mental health issues, and explain? And Mr. Barry, you can go first.
Thank you. Without a doubt, the spectrum of the criminal justice system as it deals with somebody who has been charged with a violation of the law involves many facets. And treatment for mental health and substance abuse, alternative ways to address incarceration, and really effectuate change in somebody's life, all those are part of the broader system. If you operate within the parameters of the law that's been established by the legislature of this state, and that if you look at those individuals and address their needs, help try to understand why they're at where they're at, what's landed them in the position they're in, and use the available resources and programs to address them and hopefully rehabilitate them, that's a success within the system. The use of diversion programs is not new. Some are tried and tested. Some have proved to be helpful. Others have not. New ones will come. But I think it's important to always remain open to change and addressing things so that people can be rehabilitated and put back out in society, which in the end of the day is a win for all of us. So yes, I would be committed to looking at those.
And just very quickly with this minute or so you have left, could you talk about the diversion programs that are offered here in Muscatine?
Well, there really aren't too many diversion programs in Muscatine currently. There's been talk of doing a drug court here, which would be a diversion for folks that normally enter the criminal system in drug court. There obviously are mental health and substance abuse services. There's a jail diversion program for work release, those sorts of things, but without specifically stating what diversion programs the person that asked the question was interested in, it would be hard to go beyond the general facets of the system that currently exist.
Thank you. Mr. Tharp?
Gracias. Con respeto, esta comunidad necesita cambiar. Y para cambiar, y ustedes saben exactamente qué es justo y qué es necesario hoy, es para ustedes saben que yo sé qué es justo y cambiar es necesario. Señor Barry no habla de cambiar y yo quiero cambiar porque cambiar es completamente necesario. Y in inglés, we have many problems and people need justice. Now, justice is not the same for one person as another. A millionaire, if they're levied a $1,000 fine, it is much different for justice, as I spoke earlier, to be used rather than someone that is a working family and does not have the same opportunity. And so when I look at diversion programs, I think that hits the heart of it because we're looking at justice. What is justice for someone? Justice is to have a result, not to have the exact same result, but to have the consequences of a certain event to be the same for one person or similar as another. And the consequences for one person may be different than another. For example, if someone is convicted of a certain crime, and mi cuñado es un residente, my brother-in-law is a resident, and so every 10 years he needs to worry about if he can, or my sister worries about things. He doesn't because he stays out of trouble. But there need to be different ways because there are different penalties that apply to Latinos as opposed to another resident that doesn't have any situations.
And would you like to respond at all?
Well, I guess I'm not sure of the disparity in treatment between Latinos and anybody else. Frankly, that's not something I've seen in Muscatine County or I've experienced in the Muscatine County Attorney's Office, the court system, or with law enforcement. Are there ramifications for somebody that would be here illegally if they are convicted of a crime? Absolutely, there's ramifications, and that's addressed as part of the criminal system. But that's not a diversion program. A diversion program is a way to keep somebody out of being incarcerated or hopefully get them rehabilitated and back out and being a productive member of society. That's the goal. That should be the goal of all of us, whatever your nationality or race.
And just very quickly, with about 30 seconds or so, why did you think it was important to answer the question in Spanish?
It's important to answer this in Spanish because although LULAC have Latin American citizens, the word that I've seen growing up in West Liberty has gone from calling everybody a Mexican, which was wrong, to being Latino, which refers to people in Latin America, and then Hispanic, and there are Spanish-speaking folks that are from Spain that have white skin and blue eyes. And in the criminal justice system, I've been a criminal defense attorney here in Muscatine County for well over 15 years of my 19 years in practice. And to say that Latinos are treated the same as people that are complected the same as me, I'll leave that to the voters and people, so they know the truth.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. So moving on, in terms of ideology and how you view things, when speaking about this position, it seems as though one of you believes that the office is running efficiently and effortlessly, and the other thinks the opposite. So this next question is, please tell me and explain, why and what about this office is running efficiently, and what do you see as the most pressing issue facing Muscatine County Attorney's Office, and what will you do about it? And Mr. Barry, you may go first.
Thank you. It would be difficult for anybody who's not involved in the day-to-day operations of the office to speak well about the office operations. Now, I might be the interim county attorney, which gives me insight that others don't have. That's not a criticism, that's just reality. The office is comprised of 11 people, including myself. There are 2 in fine collection, there's 3 legal secretaries, and there's 5 total attorneys. And there's a victim witness coordinator. Those people are charged with handling all the criminal cases that are filed in Muscatine County. That's an enormous job. Under COVID, that's even been a greater challenge. But the office has been working along efficiently and effectively. We've been in the office every day since COVID broke, doing our jobs and helping the court in addressing whatever cases we can when we can. Is there a backlog of cases? Absolutely there is, and we're going to have to overcome that. But that's a matter of judicial resources and time. I don't know about my predecessor in terms of his operation of the office. I know for me, I'm there every day setting the example. I'm there every day putting in the work, and I'm there every day to make sure that we do things as efficiently and effectively as we can.
Thank you. I don't speak to the record of day-to-day operations Mr. Barry happens to have because he just started in May. But I think that what you're asking about is record. You know, what is your record? Now, I've been here, I grew up here in West Liberty. I established my practice. My wife teaches in the dual language program. My 3 kids are all in it, which speak much better Spanish and will laugh at me when they see how I spoke in Spanish. But when we look at what day-to-day operations and what the record is, my record is that I've worked, my clients are close to 50% Latino. And that doesn't mean criminal cases or criminal defense. That means I'm representing business owners that are Latinos that are working through different things, setting up businesses in addition to everything else that may happen. And Mr. Barry also has a record, and it doesn't begin on May 1st. He has actually been a county attorney before, and he was a county attorney in Cass County, Iowa. C-A-S-A-S-A in Iowa. And so if you want to look at the record, it's much better and much more efficient to look at the record that when he was actually a county attorney for 7, 8 years, I think. I mean, it's very available on the internet or public records to see what his history is of day-to-day operations. Now, my record of day-to-day operations, I seriously and strongly ask you and beg you to talk to your neighbors, to your friends, to anybody that you know or clients of mine to understand what my record is with people of Latino descent. And I think that you will see that there is a clear difference between the way that I approach issues and my opponent.
Would you like to respond?
We all have a record. I have a record too, some successes and some failures. I've learned in my almost 60 years that it's the failures of my life that help define me and make things very clear for me in terms of moving forward. I do have a record. I have been in the county attorney's office before. I was a county attorney for 14 years, served as an assistant for 3 years. I've been an attorney for over 30 years. I'm duly qualified by the Supreme Court of this state to serve in this capacity. I have infinitely more experience than Mr. Tharp has in day-to-day county attorney's operations in any facet. If that matters to people, that's fine. That's the truth. That's the record. I stand by my record, I stand by my failures, and I stand by the opportunity I have to move forward from those failures, just like anybody else.
And I'd like just to quickly discuss, you brought up his record. Is there anything specifically that you're referring to?
You know, I think we're talking about, you know, as he explained his day-to-day record, and what I'd like to speak to is your record comes from morality. It comes from who you are. It comes from your faith. It comes from those experiences. But it also comes down to decisions that you make, and then will you act in conformity with those decisions you've made in the past. I had a neighbor once when I was living in Ottumwa that would let his dog out and do his business on anybody else's yard. And so that dog learned that that's the way things went. Now, I've had dogs, and I make sure that they stay in their own yard and do their business. Now, what do we want as a county?
Now, just very briefly, then we'll move on. Much like animals, humans do have the capacity to change. Do you think that your opponent does have that capacity to change?
Oh, I think it's possible. The question is for the voters as to if they think that it's probable. And also, I think that they would have to understand what the record truly is, and if whatever happened may have been a simple mistake, or if there was a pattern and a conduct and an action that would cause people serious pause, or if it's something that instead would say, oh, that was just a little thing, didn't sign something correctly, although we're under responsibility as attorneys not to make those kind of mistakes. That's called negligence. And so I think the record speaks for itself. I don't have the time to go into everything in Mr. Barry's record, just like he doesn't have the time to go into everything that's in mine. And so it's going to be up to the voters to research this issue, because who we are dictates who we will be.
Thank you. Now, moving on to our next issue, which is racial justice. Do you believe that the county attorney's office has a duty to reduce racial disparities in the criminal legal system? And Mr. Tharp, you may go first.
Definitely. I do believe that we have a duty and a responsibility to work with racial disparities in the criminal justice system because of that word justice. It is the responsibility and the ethical duty of a county attorney or a prosecutor to achieve justice, which is different from a regular practicing attorney, where their ethical duty is to zealously advocate for their client and be an officer of the court. But the prosecutor or the county attorney has extra responsibility, which is to do justice. It doesn't mean to prosecute every ticket that they receive to the fullest extent of the law, because they're not representing the state against the people, because that doesn't make any sense, because the state and the people are the same thing. And so as for addressing racial disparities, I've been able to observe it. To say that it doesn't happen is ridiculous, because we all know it. We've all seen it. And so part of my responsibility, and a big part of my responsibility, will be to make sure that people are given equal access to justice. And justice is being treated fairly and having an equitable result that would be similar to someone of any different possible advantage, be it that they have money, or that they have political influence, or any other possible advantage someone may feel they have. That's not justice. It's not justice at all. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "I crave for the day when people are going to be judged by the content of their character as opposed to the color of their skin." Now, when you look out in West Liberty, I've got the huge benefit that I see 50% of the people are Latino. And so if someone gives an example that someone is of different color, that doesn't help much. But in different places, it seriously does, and we need to fix that racial disparity.
Mr. Barry?
There's not an angle you can answer this question from that doesn't start at the same place, which is we are all created equal. We are created equal, period. And we should be viewed equally, period. The criminal justice system is no different. The criminal justice system should equally deal with people. But the foundation of that system is based on religious principles that go back to equal creation. And we are equal in the eyes of our Lord. And as a result, we should go forth equally and apply the law equally. To do otherwise would certainly not be an appropriate use of the county attorney's powers. If and when you see it, you call it out. I really can't say any more than that. It's about that simple.
Well, I mean, so the follow-up to that would just be, and I think you somewhat answered saying you'd call it out. What can you do, and what would you do to reduce that racial disparity?
Well, the charges that are filed are filed. You certainly have discretion when charges are filed to review the case. All the attorneys review the reports and the videos and everything associated with each and every case. And if there's an allegation made of some racial injustice or a problem of that nature, then you have to investigate it and deal with it. If the circumstances warrant, then you may have to take action or seek input from others to take action on behalf. So it's not being blind to it. It's not saying it doesn't exist. It's saying that you shouldn't approach the office that way. Law enforcement shouldn't approach their job that way. The court system shouldn't approach their job that way. We are all equal, and we deserve the equal protection of the law, which is guaranteed by our Creator and by our Constitution.
Thank you. Would you like to respond at all?
Yes, and I appreciate the discussion about our Creator and about our faith. I was brought up in the Lutheran Church, and so I needed to memorize Luther's small catechism to get past my dad's possibility. But when I started having kids, we also entered them into quite rigorous religious instruction. One of those was JBQ, which is Junior Bible Quiz. And 2 of my 3 kids, because the other one was too old to be in that, she's in Teen Bible Quiz, they were required to memorize and have the statement of where it came from in the Bible. And so by teaching them, I was able to learn a few things. To say that we're created equal is true, but you have Eve being created out of Adam's rib, and then she takes the bite out of the apple. Also, throughout the Old Testament, if we're using the biblical allegory and trying to snow past everything, then I'll tell you, in the Bible, people following Judaism, they had a set of laws set up in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. And the Lord said that as for the others, as for Philistines, as for Samaritans, they can all do what they want. But as for you, my chosen people, you are required to do this. And so there were laws. And were they equal? Not as Mr. Barry is saying that everyone's created equally under the law. And I don't mean to bring this into a biblical debate or anything like that, because it really isn't. So, but at the same time, if we're going to bring up the Bible saying that we're all created equal,
30 seconds.
I don't want to give you some kind of answer that's not true. I don't want it taken out of context. There's a problem here, and we need to take care of it.
Would you like to respond at all, or?
I think I've said all I need to say about equal justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. Moving on, our next topic is poverty. So the question is, do you agree that the high fines, fees, and financial assessments in the criminal and traffic court system have contributed to the criminalization of poverty, where poor people face harsher outcomes due to their poverty? And Mr. Barry, you may go first.
The fines that are typically imposed in response to any criminal infraction are typically governed by statute and are either set as a scheduled amount or are set in a discretionary amount with a minimum. So to answer your question, the legislature of this state has established a fine system that they believe is appropriate to impose as a minimum in most cases. That said, is that difficult for people in society sometimes to pay? Absolutely, it's difficult for people in society sometimes to pay. Is it something that can mount up and cause problems down the road for individuals that have been in the system? Absolutely, it can. And so, without a doubt, fines matter to people. Not everybody has the ability to pay. The court has most recently taken a step with certain amounts to make a reasonable determination of ability to pay, which is now done, and people can shed themselves of certain costs if the court finds that they don't have the ability to pay. So fines are part of the system. They're imposed as part of the penalty. They do matter to people, and sometimes paying them is difficult and contributes to further problems for the individuals that are involved in the system.
Thank you. Mr. Tharp?
So to summarize, my opponent said yes to your answer that it causes problems for regular day people, everyday working people. But he said that's tough luck. That's the way this thing goes. This is the way it's going to be enforced. And I don't see that as the first ethical responsibility of a prosecutor. Of course, fines work with people differently. Somebody that's got $1 million or $1,000 that can pay for justice, get things figured out, it's a lot easier for them than somebody who is behind on bills, especially with COVID-19, where many have lost their jobs or hours have been cut, and now they're just fighting to make it by. And now they're fighting to drive to Davenport or Iowa City or anywhere they can get a job. And when they're fighting to do that, now they have a ticket and it's maybe $500. Now that's not something somebody that's working day to day and is behind on bills has. And also, it's something that somebody that has $100,000 in the bank or even $50,000 can just write a check. That's not justice. And so as a result, we need to, instead of just saying that's tough luck and that's the way it is, justice means we look at every situation differently. The word standard deal shouldn't exist. It just shouldn't exist. because all consequences aren't the same for everybody. Now, they all have, the crime that happened to be committed, if this is brought forward and it should be prosecuted, is the same. But alternatively, the punishments, a punishment for somebody that, is scrapping around to try and get food for their family, and now they'll lose their job because if they don't pay their fine within 45 days, they're going to lose their license. That's sure a heck of a lot different than the guy that's got $100,000 in the bank and just drops it quickly. And I think everybody knows that. I didn't think I had to answer that. People know it.
Would you like to respond?
Again, the fines are basically established by the legislature and imposed by the court. To sit here and say that we can ignore that on a case-by-case basis isn't doing what you raise your right hand to do when you take the office.
And just a quick follow-up, Mr. Tharp. You talked about how this is an issue, so if you were to be county attorney, what can and will you do to make this not an issue, to fight these fees?
Thank you. There are ways to work with it to set up payment programs. I worked at Dave Wetch's office, Wetch and Abbott, who represented the 5 biggest credit card companies in Iowa back when I was in my first year in practice. I know how to work with creditors. I know how to work with people that owe money. And I know how to make situations work so that they can make these payments and get right with the state. And then also they can still keep their license. They can continue to provide for their family, or else they become desperate. And you know what people do when they're desperate? Desperate things. And that involves crimes. And that is exactly what we need to avoid, instead of trying to exacerbate.
Thank you. Would you like to respond at all?
The defendants are always given an opportunity to pay. There's, again, a minimum payment that's established by the court. They're given time and an opportunity. The court system works with them diligently to allow for payment. So to say anything otherwise would be simply not understanding the way the system operates.
Thank you. Moving on to the topic of incarceration. Do you believe that incarceration solves drug use, poverty, or homelessness issues? And please explain. And Mr. Tharp, you may go first.
It obviously doesn't. We have 5% of the world's population, 25% of the people incarcerated. All persons. Has mass incarceration worked? Everybody knows that it hasn't. And I had a client, I've seen this up close and personal. I had a client that spent 8 months out of an entire year on the dime of the Muscatine County taxpayer on public intoxication because he's got an alcohol problem. And he didn't have someone in his family that would be able to commit him. And so we as taxpayers got charged $55 a day that he's never going to pay back because he constantly gets put back in jail. And you're not going to hire somebody that's not a reliable employee into a job that can pay things back. So incarceration should be the last resort. There are, as from representing criminal defendants, there are some bad guys out there. There are some truly bad guys out there. But there are other people that have made mistakes. And they're not truly bad guys. And so as a result, we need to look at each situation individually, not a standard deal. Look at their circumstances. Look at what is going on around the community. And I'm not telling anybody anything that they don't know already. They know what's right. Es solamente, ustedes necesitan saber que yo sé que es justo. And that's what I'm here to tell you about. And I feel like I've let you know, and I'm trying to be as forward as I possibly can and not give any political answers, but just like as if we were hermanos, I was explaining it to you directly.
And just a quick follow-up. Could you explain for the audience at home what you mean by standard deal?
Standard deal would be something that's usually pushed and says, okay, this person's been charged with this offense. This is what we do in every case. Here it is. Now, everybody is different. The consequences and justice to be achieved is to say that the consequences should be similar. Now, if the consequences for one person is going to be far different from the consequences to another, how can we possibly give the same deal and call that justice? If so, then it's giving one person a complete slap on the wrist and then someone else what they should. Or it's giving one person what they should and then it's really nailing somebody else to the wall. That's what I mean by standard deal, and that's why I think we need to take more time instead of just trying to save time. I know a lot of people that work 20 times harder not to do work as it would to just do the work. And I think everybody watching knows somebody like that. And so it's going to take some work, it's going to take some effort, but I'm from here. And this is where my kids live, and I hope this is where they end up living. And so I'm here to make, I was called to make this a community where they can grow up and they can know that there's justice.
Mr. Barry?
Plea bargaining is certainly part of the system. Incarceration is a tool just like any of the other tools that are used by the court to deal with folks that are charged with violating the law. To say that incarceration isn't appropriate or that we got to quit using it is not appropriate. There are people that need to be incarcerated. There are victims that need to be protected, and there's society that needs to be protected. So to act as if incarceration is not part of the equation is simply not the case, and is not consistent with Iowa law, where in terms of incarceration are often imposed again by the legislature. Plea bargaining is on a case-by-case basis. There's no doubt that there are standards that are used by any office when you're dealing with hundreds and thousands of cases in a given year. And so you have to have some standard from which you start off and look at the case, but never forget, at the end of the day, it's the court that decides the sentence, not the prosecutor. The prosecutor decides what charges to bring to court and how to pursue those. Beyond that, it's the court, with the input of both the defendant, defense counsel, and the state, and the Department of Probation, that hopefully makes the best choices about what happens with people in terms of punishment.
So are you suggesting that there is a standard deal, but it's not necessarily used, it's more so just used as an example?
Well, there's, let's look at an OWI first offense, a minimum 2 days in jail, a violation of a domestic no contact order. Lots of charges have minimum level time that go with those charges that are often used as the baseline. And so to say there's a standard deal, well, in OWI cases or a driving while barred case, on the one hand, we want to treat everybody the same, and on the other hand, we want to look at everybody differently. And so plea bargaining necessarily requires that we look at things across the board, and we consider what the legislature's told us to do and use that, and when we craft a plea offer, and then ask the court to do what we think's appropriate, ultimately with the court making that decision. That's the beauty of the adversarial system. It isn't the prosecutor making the decision. It's the prosecutor who's making a recommendation, just like defense counsel would be doing, and the court making a decision.
Would you like to respond at all?
Con respeto, ustedes tienen razón y no necesito hablar más porque ustedes saben qué es sus vidas, qué son sus vidas y pueden hablar con unos abogados y pueden tener qué es correcto y qué es una mentira. Gracias.
Anything you'd like to add?
No, thank you.
Well, moving on. This next topic involves transparency. And the question is, will you commit to publicly posting statistical information on charging decisions, convictions, plea bargains, diversion programs, placements, and sentences degraded by race and gender? And Mr. Tharp, you may go first.
I'd like to do that as much as possible. I think that question is challenging just because, and I want to make sure that this isn't a political answer, that this is a factual answer. I'm not going to snow you. I want you to understand exactly how this works. There are people with the name Rodriguez that appear very white or may be of white descent and married somebody that was Latino. And so just by taking their name and putting them into a statistical abstract would be incorrect, and it would throw off the numbers. And so also, if there is a way that we can find this out, I suggest having a forum at least once a month with community groups such as LULAC, who has stepped up to be able to be a voice for Latinos in this community, and also in Iowa. They've stepped up beyond what the ACLU has done. I mean, to bring justice to people. But I'm committed to meeting not only with LULAC, I'm committed to meeting with any group on a monthly basis to discuss these matters, and then they can talk to their membership about exactly how things are going. Because I want to be as transparent as I can, but there are limitations and restrictions on us providing those numbers. And that's not because I don't want to, because I'll tell you, I sure do. Growing up in a town that was 33% Latino and now living in a town that's over 50% Latino, I want people to know what's going on. I want them to know what has been going on. I want them to know what has happened, everything in my history, in my record. I want them to also know what's happened in Mr. Barry's record and his history, and I want them to make an informed decision. And going forward, I commit to having at least a monthly meeting with any group leaders that have any concerns, if it's racial disparities or just anything else, because making this a better community is foremost and why I was called to do this.
The information that you seek by the question is already basically contained within the court system records. It's not something that the county attorney's office would necessarily need to generate or disseminate to the public. Obviously, transparency matters. That's why being there every day matters. That's why answering the phone and getting back with people that take the time to contact you, even if it's not your particular case or your job. Those are all the things I've done in the past, and those are all the things that I would continue to do in the future. If somebody calls my office and wants to talk to me, they get a call back from me. That's just how I operate. If that's transparency, that's great. If that's what people are looking for, that's great. But this isn't about hiding the ball. You need to protect the investigation, there's no doubt about that, and protect the victims. But it's not about hiding information from anybody. And complete transparency is appropriate because it's a public position in a public office. We work for the public.
Would you like to respond at all?
I heard something funny from one of my clients this week. He said, you know, when we got something from another attorney and offered to settle a case, he said, you know, I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night. And I got a good kick out of that. And so I think that we should look at the completeness of the record, not just what you're hearing during this interview today, to see what consistency is and what life has been like, because our morality has been set. I understand that Billy Graham has brought many people to be born-again Christians, and I believe that is a great thing and an important thing. But I think in this position, the Lord gives me direction by giving me the morality, but there's the law, and that's a different thing. And so we need to follow the law, and we need to take care of business and be judged on our experience and record as to what we will do.
Anything you'd like to add?
I'm not sure there's a response to that. Thank you.
So this will be our last question before we go to our closing statements here. So for the people here of Muscatine and for the citizens living here, why is the county attorney's office important? Why should people pay attention, and why should it be something they think about when they go to the polls? And Mr. Barry, you may go first.
You could look at the county attorney's office like the gatekeeper to the criminal system. The county attorney's office reviews all charges that are filed by law enforcement, decides if those charges are appropriate, decides whether those charges should continue forward or something else should happen. And so it's an extremely important position, because you don't enter the criminal system without the blessing of the county attorney's office, or in a few rare cases, a grand jury, which hasn't been something typically used here in Muscatine County. So for the citizens of this county, not only those that are in trouble, but those that are victims, those that are family and friends of victims, the criminal system is extremely important. And it should be treated as such. The integrity of the system and justice being blind are absolute imperatives if people are going to have faith in the system and believe in the system. And that requires people of good moral character, that requires people to be there to do their job and have a solid foundation and principles and character to move forward. So it's an extremely important position. A judge can decide a case, but a judge doesn't hear a case that the county attorney doesn't bring. The court doesn't hear a case and the defense counsel doesn't defend a case that the county attorney doesn't pursue. And so we truly are the gatekeeper. And those gatekeepers have to have a handle and a pulse, take the pulse of the community and what's going on and act appropriately and equally.
Thank you. Mr. Tharp?
Thank you. I have a great example that brings up the importance of the county attorney's race, how it affects your freedom and also your finances. Chris Ward was the city attorney in the city of West Liberty. There were some overage issues with the electrical bill, and instead of trying to figure it out, which Mr. Ward did not get a single penny from, felony charges were brought against him. Now he's a city manager, and now he's the city manager at Vinton, and they love him there. But because he was charged with a felony, he would not have been able to be a city manager anywhere else if he had not been able to, if he hadn't been able to beat the charge. And he was completely innocent. And why do I say he was completely innocent? Because he was charged by the Muscatine County Attorney's Office, and it went to the Supreme Court and Court of Appeals, and they said, this case never should have even been filed. But you know, it wasn't just a prosecutor's decision of saying, well, if they're not guilty, I guess the jury will just say so. Oh, it didn't work like that for Chris. You know, for Chris, he had to cash out his 401k. He had to talk to his family. He had to come up with $50,000 to go ahead and defend himself. And when that decision came down from the Supreme Court, they said dismiss the case, but Muscatine County didn't write him a check right away. He had $50,000 or more in legal expenses. And so now we get to your own individual finances. Now let's talk about the county's finances. As a result, the county got sued for what they did that was incorrect in the prosecutor's office, whose policies we see in the newspapers that want to be continued. I want them changed. And as a result, we paid a large settlement to him. We paid a large settlement for a jail administrator. If I go back, I don't have a whole lot of time, but we could go through all the judgments that came out of my pocket and your pockets. This is very important for you because of your freedom, how you could be put in jail quickly, and then also what the amount of money you would have to spend to defend yourself, and then also the amount of money that would get kicked onto your taxes because of it, all because of a poor decision by a county attorney. You need to trust a county attorney to be fair, moral, and just. Thank you for this opportunity to talk.
Thank you both, and now you'll be given about a minute or so to just give your closing statements. And Mr. Tharp, you may go first.
Oh, I appreciate the time. Con respeto, ustedes son mis hermanos, ustedes son mis amigos, para mi cuñado y sus amigos, y importantemente, mis maestras en vida. Porque tengo maestras en el colegio y en la universidad, pero personas en la comunidad latina son mis maestros en vida. And with that, I am able to understand the issues of Latinos. They do not have the same issues that anybody else has. There are certain unique, specific issues that affect Latinos that don't affect other residents. I have seen it up close. I have heard people yell racial slurs at the buses as our teams went in from West Liberty to other towns. I have been there, but you know, I can walk away and be in Iowa City and be another white guy. But I understand that Latinos don't have that same luxury. So I'm not saying I'm one of you, but I say I stand by you completely. Thank you.
Mr. Barry.
I stand by all people. Again, we're created equal. It's a job that requires equal enforcement and equal application, and any other approach is inappropriate and problematic at best. I've served for the last 5 months. I stand willing to serve. I put aside a job, a good job, to take this opportunity and to move forward when frankly nobody else would. Nobody else did. And I knew that I had to do that and make that choice and run for election this fall. And I knew I had to do that under the history and record that I have. I stand before you not a proud man, but a man who's learned from his history. A man who's willing to stand up and admit that, and more importantly, accept the forgiveness and move forward. That's what I'm about. And if that rings true to you, great. I'll be there every day doing my job, and I will be available. If it doesn't ring true to you and you want to make it about things that are on the extremes, you're feel free to do that as well. That's not where I'm at. I'm at where the foundation of this country started and where the foundation of this country needs to be. That's where I'm at.
Well, thank you. I would like to sincerely thank you both for the service that you both have given to your communities, and I wish the best of luck to both of you.
Thank you, sir.
And ladies, gentlemen, and others at home, thank you for joining us. Once again, we had Republican James Barry and Democrat Bill Tharp both running for county attorney. Please join us Saturday, October 24th, as we interview Ed Asnew for Muscatine Board of Supervisors, District 3, and the County Auditor, candidate Mary Mason Wheeler. Followed by the Muscatine Board of Supervisor debate for District 4 with Nathan Mather and Michelle Servadio Elias. And as a reminder, do not forget to vote November 3rd and that you can vote early. Good night, and thank you.